before we get into it, I'm going to go back to my original thing that I wanted to make sure when I sat down today. I said, I got to, because Saturday in the gym, I'm like, I got to share this story that Conrad, sometimes it takes me a while for the light bulb to go off in so many ways. But, the format that we do here at Ad Free, and this is what the guy shared with me. And when you're on side by side with a guy with a Stairmaster, talking is a good thing because you forget about just putting in time. But we got into this kind of, it was, I don't say deep discussion, but it was. He's a lifelong wrestling fan. He moved a couple of times in his childhood. And so he got a taste of the Kansas City territory, taste of the Texas territory. And he actually had some of, not Florida, but the Fullers, the Continental, the Birmingham, a little bit. But, that was kind of his set point. So hearing he wasn't wrapped up. Like if you grew up in Memphis, it was Lawler Dundee and Jimmy Hart, whatever territory you're in, you kind of dove off into, and that was almost the complete foundation. And then, they're modern day fans that, okay, I was a high school, went to the Attitude Era. That's kind of a set point. It's just how time goes on. But this guy, he is a successful businessman, and he's like, when Conrad first came out, he thought Bruce was your first one, but, he listened to Bruce. And then, Bruce's, his position in the business as far as what his job description, if we wrote out, and that's what he said. He said, if you kind of write out job descriptions of everybody in Conrad's family, it's their point of view. So Eric came from the announcer, and then he moved up to executive, and Bruce in Texas. And then you got JR and myself and Kurt and Nash, and all of us kind of go together. And he says, so it's a different viewpoint. And then as we all know, you get into the kind of the narrative of Meltzer, Keller, Powell, from time to time, Mike Johnson, Dave Scheer, whatever the sheets of their point of view. And he said, a lot of times it's point counterpoint, but he said, it's really not. He said, because you guys kind of wade through it. And he says, your firsthand account, he said, because, and he named three, this is what I thought was cool. He named 3 or 4 events that he goes, Jeff, I've heard your point of view. I've heard Eric's point of view. I've heard Bruce's point of view, all these different ones that, Conrad, the amount of knowledge you have in your brain, because I know my point of view, and maybe I've heard bits and pieces, but you've heard 4, 5, 6 different versions, if you will, and the version and all that. But just kind of the evolution of the ad-free family. If you want to know about our industry, but then this is where he tied it up. He said it's a lot further for him than an industry. It is business in general, because you take the mid-90s, he said, we've got a 30-year arc of a span. And he said, you can learn. He said, this doesn't relate to every kind of business, but in the entertainment business, and this guy, that buddy of mine, he's a big time marketing guy, and he's moved in, started out as a regular marketer, now digital marketer. And now he's in products and all kinds of stuff. But I say all that to say, if you really want to get a education on the business of wrestling, man, you don't have to take anybody's word for it. Just listen to a few podcasts every week and you'll make up your own. That's what he said. He said, I've got my viewpoints on all of it because I've heard all y'all's. But anyway, he was very appreciative of the work, I hate to say it, that you do, Conrad. So that's my whole point. He's very appreciative of the work that goes in, week out, because he said it's a real education. He said, you can't find that in other forms of podcast. He said, it's just not out there. And he said, I've looked. So hats off, pal. But it was pretty cool that the way his viewpoint was, it's kind of a tutorial in 6, 7, 8 viewpoints of guys. And then you got Meltzer and Keller that is kind of your running thread, and then your interjections. But he was very appreciative of the work of the ad-free family is what he said. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'll take those flowers. And I kind of feel similarly that, the idea is we let the listeners decide who they want to believe. I mean, the original format of this show was, hey, what were we as the quote unquote smart fans led to believe happened? What did we read happened? and now what quote unquote really happened from someone who was there. And of course, in time, we've found things that were printed in newsletters that weren't technically true. We've also heard things from some of our talking heads that they just remembered it differently and it wasn't technically true. And I know sometimes people get caught up on saying, well, this guy's a liar or that guy's a liar. I choose to say, you know, the old Tony Costanza is, it's not a lie if I believe it. So if Dave Meltzer was told something in 1993 and he was told something by someone in the office, he had no reason to think that person would be lying. But if that person did have a different agenda and Dave ran with it, Dave has believed that as fact ever since. But if someone else in the office said, well, that's not exactly why that happened, and here's why they said it, well, that account might not also be 100% true either. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And we've seen this, like there's been a lot of great television series that I've seen where there was one about a divorce a few years ago, and I forget exactly what the name of it was. It may have been called The Affair, but you saw things from the husband's perspective and from the wife's perspective and from the quote unquote other woman's perspective. And you would see the same scene 3 times, but it would play out a little differently each time because that's the way she perceived it and that's the way he perceived it. No one in that story was lying. That's just the way they remembered it. And so that's what we offer up to the audience here. And it's up to us to sort of string together what we think really happened. But I like to do it from a place of saying, hey, nobody's intentionally lying. And I think sometimes when people misremember things, they get painted as a quote unquote liar, and that's not necessarily factual.
So my buddy, we were talking, and I'm going to really paraphrase this, and we'll get on with the topic because we got a lot to talk about. But I told him, I said, you have no idea how many times, not just me, probably much more Conrad, but it's me that I go to whoever it may be. Hey, did you listen to the podcast? Well, no,
Right.
no. I read what was reported online. I said, do yourself a favor. That's their interpretation.
That's right.
I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but I said, Conrad, 10-1, how many times he may get a call or a text or whatever, and he'll say, well, now hold on. Did you really listen to what was said on our podcast? Well, no, but this, okay, then go listen to it and get back to me.
Dude, I got ate up. I don't know that I told you this, but I got ate up about 8 times last month for various different podcasts by various different people in the industry. Some people who work with those different initials, some people who work in the journalism side of things.
Really?
And they were not happy. And I was just battling every day. And it's like, hey, did you listen? Because I would, as our pal Eric says, context is king. We present the information and then we give commentary around it. But when we're presenting information, it's my job, I think, as the guy with the microphone here, to just say, hey, here's what's reported. Here's what people are saying. What do you think? That doesn't necessarily mean that's what I think. That's what I'm reporting as fact. I'm not a reporter. I'm not a journalist. I am, and I know this annoys people when I say it, I'm just a fan. I'm lucky enough to be the first listener. That's not totally true because right now there's a whole lot of folks listening with us. And I want to thank little Jimmy Sorensen and Coach Keith Morrison and Josh Fields. And how about Jen Vargo and Brad Stanton and so many of these folks hanging out with us today in our live studio audience. Appreciate you guys showing up and showing out for us on a Monday morning. But I just think of myself as like the first listener. I'm here to present information and sort of guide the conversation. And then when it's time, I'm going to yell about wiener pills. I mean, that's kind of what I do here on the program.